There is chaos in Kabul as the Taliban take control of Afghanistan. Thousands of Afghans desperate to escape jammed the airport as the U.S. military evacuated diplomats and civilians.
In an address to the nation, President Joe Biden admitted the American withdrawal did not go well, but he maintained staying in Afghanistan just does not make any sense.
This is not in our national security interest. It is not what the American people want. It is not what our troops, who have sacrificed so much over the past 2 decades, deserve. I made a commitment to the American people when I ran for president that I would bring America's military involvement in Afghanistan to an end.
So the Taliban have claimed they want a peaceful transition, but millions of Afghans live in fear. So here to talk about what is next is Jonathan Schroden. He's with CNA, a nonprofit analysis organization. He's also been an advisor to the U.S. forces in Afghanistan and U.S. Central Command. So good morning to you, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
So the first question, I think that it's on a lot of people's minds. How did we wind up in this chaotic scramble to get out of the country?
It's a good question, and a lot of us are still struggling to answer it in a lot of detail. I think, what we can point to over the last several months is a situation where the Afghanistan government, which has been known to be hugely corrupt for a long time, was unable to support its forces in the field. So early in this Taliban offensive, there were indications that the Afghan army soldiers, were trying to stand and fight. But after a couple of days, we're running out of ammunition, we're running out of food, we're calling for reinforcements and for airstrikes and not getting them. And so they turned and fled, as I think any force in that situation would. And then what happened is that spread. News of that spread throughout the security forces, throughout the army and the police. And increasingly, you saw forces deserting without fighting. And this became effectively an avalanche of desertion, to the point where Afghanistan's major cities, toppled within a matter of a week.
Jonathan, did we not learn the lessons of Vietnam? The photos, the video coming out of Afghanistan right now, so eerily similar. 20 years in that country, training and fighting with the Afghan army. How could we have not trained them to protect themselves from the Taliban after all of this time, all of this money, all of this bloodshed?
I think the short answer to your question is no, we did not effectively learn all of the lessons of Vietnam. We made many similar mistakes in Afghanistan. And the answer to your second question is we have a predilection to try and build capacity in foreign security forces by giving them things. And so we gave the Afghan security forces helicopters, airplanes, tens of thousands of up-armored vehicles, miniature drones, all of these things. But we never effectively built the institutions to sustain those things. And so again, when the forces got into fights in the field, the logistics, right, the air supply, the reinforcements never came because we never built the institutions to provide those things to forces in the field when they would get into these types of fights with the Taliban.
Right, and we heard from the president, though, where he pretty much said, look, we set them up for success here, but they didn't put up a fight. There was no fight by the Afghan army. So is that necessarily true? And then how the president himself said, we didn't see this happening this quickly. How could you not see it happening this quickly with everything you're saying?
Well, I think the short answer to your first question is no, that's not entirely true. And I have an article in Politico this morning that actually talks about that. The U.S. has for a month been calling on Afghan leaders to stand up and take charge and exert the will to fight. But again, we never built the institutions to produce those leaders at scale. So there were a handful of leaders that tried to stand up and fight, but the country needed thousands of them, and we never built those. And to your question about the speed of this all, and did we see it coming? I think those of us that followed Afghanistan closely were not surprised by how quickly the Taliban moved early in their offensive to seize rural areas. But I've admitted publicly, I was shocked at how quickly they were able to seize the cities, because that's where Afghanistan's managed to stand and fight.
I want to talk about the women of Afghanistan. There is a lot of inherent fear here because of a horrific past. Now, the Taliban has come in and said, look, we're reaching out to women. Do not be afraid. We want you to be involved. But can they trust that? And are the women in danger?
I don't think they can trust it at the outset. There is no reason for them to trust the Taliban. without the Taliban having demonstrated that they are in fact a different organization, that they have different policies, different mindset than they did when they ruled the country back in the 90s. So the onus, I would say, is not on individual Afghans or Afghan women to trust the Taliban. The onus is on the Taliban to reach out to those communities and to demonstrate that it is, in fact, going to be different this time around, as its leaders claim that it will be.
Hey, Jonathan, very quickly before we let you go, is there some fear on the part of us as Americans that the Taliban is gaining strength, taking over Afghanistan? Perhaps we will see strikes yet again?
On the homeland, you mean?
Yes.
I mean, there is a fear of that. Certainly, the Taliban have not cut their ties with al-Qaeda as many people would like them to do. There is a risk that al-Qaeda will expand its presence again in Afghanistan, but I would also say the risk of an al-Qaeda attack on the U.S. homeland right now is very, very small from Afghanistan. And the Islamic State, which many people worry about, is actually an avowed enemy of the Taliban. And so it'll be very interesting to see how that rivalry plays out going forward as well.
All right. Jonathan Schroden of CNA, we thank you. There's so much to talk about, but thank you. We're simply out of time. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, there's a lot to dive into there.